Right now in our traditional hunting territory, look at the Cold Lake spill. Have you heard anything about that?
Nope, but are we recording? How's it sound? We sound all right?
Sound lovely.
Oh, obviously.
Okay, so on the Cold Lake Air Weapons Range in the Cold Lake tar sands deposit, in May, they reported an oil spill. And it wasn't a pipeline spill. It was this toxic emulsion, this oil emulsion that was coming out of the ground. And from there, it was like a chain of events. All of a sudden, there was 4 spills. 4 spills of this emulsion coming up from underneath the ground. And they didn't know how to stop it. They didn't know how long it was going. And this is on a CNRL, Canadian Natural Resources Limited, site on the Cold Lake Air Weapons Range. What we ended up finding out was that the process that they're using is actually, it's not in situ, it's not SAGD, it's a process called CSS, cyclic steam simulation is what it's called. What we ended up finding out is that this process actually comes out of an accident that happened in Venezuela by Shell. So what it was is, it was like a volcanic eruption that happened. And they were like, oh snap, this is a quicker, faster way to get the bitumen out of the ground. Let's use this. So that's where the CSS process came out of. And that's what they started using on the Cold Lake Air Weapons Range. The thing with CSS is it's so dangerous that it requires seismic monitoring in the ground. Further to that, they're doing CSS on an active air weapons testing range. How does that make any sense at all? So, you know, with these 4 spills happening, coming out from under the ground, they didn't know how to stop it. They didn't know where it came from. Well, yeah, what do you think? You know, so the CSS process is basically, instead of, you know, steam in, bitumen out, it's steam in, it sits in a well at 300 degrees Celsius, you know, pressure and extreme heat for like 2 weeks, and then they pump it out. So now this emulsion is coming out of the ground, and it's halfway up trees, black tar, and they're hiding it. Nobody knows about it. Now MarketWatch or MarketWire online released this, you know, this spill's going on. This was in June. And now we find out that there's 4, and so nobody's investigating, nobody's asking questions. So I actually had some really good people that came to my home at the end of June, and they happened to have a video camera. They happened to be filming a documentary. So I said, this is what's going on over there. And they're like, let's go. It was about a 40-minute drive from my house. So we went out there, and they denied me access. I cited my constitutional rights. I said, I'm a treaty status Indian of Canada. I'm a member of the Beaver Lake Cree Nation. I have constitutionally protected rights. My treaty rights that are enshrined in Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution say that I can come to the land to hunt, fish, and forage. My understanding is that there are mammals and amphibians and waterfowl being affected here. My understanding is that they're dying. And my understanding is that the whole southern portion of this lake is covered in oil. And this is reports I'm getting from people inside that are cleaning up, that are messaging me saying, Crystal, shit is messed up, you need to do something. But of course they can't say their names, they can't say who they are, they can't say who they work for or what they're doing there. They're trying to get it out of here as quick as they can so that nobody finds out about it. And I even heard a comment that's, you know, oh, wait till the First Nations people find out about this. So in that whole process, I took those people down there, and so then, you know, we have it on camera where I'm asking these questions, and I was denied access anyways. Well, your nation is currently involved in a litigation against the federal government. So basically, you know, what they said was, once the litigation's done, that will determine if you can actually get into these sites. So it's basically like a reversal of the past system that was enforced on our people, where we actually had to go, you know, to the corner of our confines of our Indian reservations up to 1960 and get permission from our white Indian agent to leave our community. This is like a reversal of that. So I felt this immense amount of oppression, and it hurt. It hurt. And so that only fueled me even more to find out what's going on. So Emma Pullman, wrote this amazing article in my kitchen in the middle of the night after our visit to CNRL and the Cold Lake Air Weapons Range. She released this article and it went crazy over social media. She did it through Huffington Post if you have a chance to look at it. And so now all of a sudden she gets this email from this government scientist, a whistleblower. I have images from the site.
Could you just briefly, sorry for cutting in, could you briefly, through the rest of your explanation, explain why a scientist would be considered a whistleblower if he's working for the government?
Well, see, and that's the thing, right? Here we are in this democratic, this government where, they're supposed to be working for the people. So the transparency is should not be an issue. But they are doing everything in their power to stop us finding out about these catastrophic events that are happening on our Mother Earth. So it's really unfortunate that we're in a situation in Canada. We're now having to call employees of the government whistleblowers when they give the public information. How does that make any sense? But when you look at what our government has done to us in the past year, let alone the rest of, previous, you look at the Bill C-38, which gutted the environmental laws in Canada, followed by the pullout from the Kyoto Protocol, followed by Bill C-45, which basically opened up First Nations land for leasing. Because prior to that, if any land wanted, you wanted to lease out, First Nations people wanted to lease out any of their land reserved for Indians, they had to consult the citizen members of the communities. So what Section 35 did was it opened that and basically gave it to whoever is in leadership at that time. So if you end up with a corrupt leader who's willing to sell you off like cattle, then you have nothing left. And then further to that was the water portion of Section 45, which basically, on one day in December of that year, we had 2.5 million protected lakes and rivers. To the following day after Bill C-45 was passed, we now have 97 protected lakes and 62 protected rivers. How messed up is that? That goes to show what our government will do, our federal government will do to ensure that they get this bitumen out of the ground, and they need our fresh water. So further to that was Bill S-8 in the province of Alberta, which is basically the privatization of our water, the commodification of our water. This industry is using 1.7 billion barrels of our fresh water every single day. 80% of the world's 1% of fresh water is in Canada, and they're using 1.7 billion barrels of that every day in this industry.
And can that water be easily cleaned?
It can't be recyclable. They can't fully clean it. You're going to hear industry out there and government out there trying to sell you these false stories that the water is recyclable. Until you can prove to me that you're recycling it 100%, you have no business using 1.7 billion barrels. If you're using 1.7 billion barrels of our fresh water every day, but you're claiming that it's recyclable, then why is it every single day you're using 1.7 billion barrels? Why are you not using the same 1.7 billion barrels every day if it's recyclable?
That's a great question. All right. When you think about Canada's involvement on an international level, could you maybe comment a little bit about perhaps maybe talk a little bit about how we pulled out of the Kyoto Protocol, and perhaps whether or not you know of how Canada is being seen on an international level? Has this affected our identity at all?
I don't know if it has. I can't speak too much on the Kyoto Protocol. What I can say is that, as per the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, we have a right to free, prior, and informed consent. So here we are as the Beaver Lake Cree Nation, a small band of about 900, who obviously, we signed treaty in 1876 with the British Crown, and within that, under the Commonwealth, the federal government took over, that responsibility. They have a fiduciary responsibility to First Nations people. And so under that responsibility, they have due process that they have to follow. Part of their due process is consultation. Further to that, we have international law that protects us, UNDRIP. So as the Beaver Lake Cree, we've gotten to a point where we've had to practice those rights by, taking the federal and the provincial government of Alberta to court. So in 2008, my nation, the Beaver Lake Cree Nation, under former retired Chief Lameman, filed a statement of claim in the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench. And in that statement, he cited over 17,000 treaty rights violations and infringements, encroachment on our traditional hunting territory. See, the thing with our treaty is that it says that as long as the sun shines, the grass grows and the rivers flow. We will always have an inherent right to the land. We will always be able to sustain ourselves off of the land. We will always be able to hunt, fish, forage, and trap. As long as, those elements are going. And so what my Uncle Al noticed is, while the sun's still shining, the grass is still growing, the rivers are still flowing, but we don't have that right to go to our land because industry is everywhere in our traditional hunting territory. So our traditional hunting territory spans about 39,000 square kilometers. 34,000 square kilometers of that has been unconstitutionally leased out to every major oil and gas company in the world. So basically, the Canadian and the provincial government didn't consult the Beaver Lake Cree when they leased out these parcels of land, this tar sands land. So the Beaver Lake Cree is located in between two of the three tar sands deposit. So the southern portion of the Athabasca and the entirety of the Cold Lake tar sands deposits. So when he filed, the Canadian government came back and basically, they tried to stop the process and said, well, you have to file every single one of those separately. So basically you have to go through court 17,000 times. The court said no. They came back, just every stop tactic that they could come up with. Then the judge granted us a trial. We set historical precedents. No nation has ever been granted a trial in relation to industry and the cumulative impacts of that industry.
And which court was this in?
The Alberta Court of Queen's Bench. So we're going for a declaration on, the cumulative impacts that this industry is having on our traditional territory and our treaty rights. To date, we are now at over 19,000 leases and permits. So the Canadian government continues to push. Nonetheless, the judicial system saw this and they saw, they took notice of their own law. This is their law. And they're violating their own law. So the judicial system took notice of that and granted us a trial. The Canadian government came back and basically said, well, we're going to appeal your right to trial under our own law that we made. We're going to appeal that right. It was denied. So here we are, this small community, a community born into first world conditions or third world conditions in a first world country. Impoverished people taking on, one of the most powerful governments in the world and, the most powerful industry in the world. So obviously it's costing us a lot of money, and they know that that's the only thing that's stopping us is money. Because everything else we've won and we're going to continue to win, and we're not going to allow, a dollar to keep us from pushing this through.
Thank you. So when we look back through the past and we look at a lot of these similar First Nations cases, sometimes even going as far as the Supreme Court, people winning these cases, but then still not exactly feeling like justice has been served, especially with like the implementation. Could you maybe speak just a little bit about the positives that are going to inevitably come out of this victory, and then the challenges going forward, and perhaps what people outside of your community might be able to think about or be conscious of going forward?
Okay, so the basis of our litigation is, like I said, the cumulative impacts. So our hope is to stop any further development until, they follow due process and true and honest consultation is done, not this whole, before the pen is going to the paper type deal. And at the same time, we are not going to, we're not going to give up any of our rights. We still want to be able to go to the land, to practice those rights, to sustain ourselves off of the land. So when we're taking moose from the land that have pus bubbles under the skin and fish that have cancers hanging off of them, we're getting boil water advisories issued by Health Canada. It's no wonder we have to utilize our rights. So when we look at, what we're going for, obviously we're not going to be able to get every single parcel of that land back to its original state. But that's part of the lawsuit, is that they have to follow through with reclamation in its entirety, not plant some trees and throw in some seeds. They have to replace it and put it back exactly the way that they found it. And if they can't do that, then they don't get to extract. And it's, stopping any further violations. So when we look at, i.e. the Cold Lake Air Weapons Range and the CNRL spill, the southern portion of that lake was covered in oil. And in the southwest portion of that lake is where Beaver Lake Cree has ancestors buried. So that's a violation. That's I don't even know what to say about that. That was the thing that prompted me. That was the thing that prompted me to get out there, was knowing that there's animals dying. So, part of this litigation is the protection of our natural habitats, our ecosystems. And obviously there's going to be some monetary settlement, because we have to be compensated somehow, because you're not going to be able to give us everything back. But the mere fact that these companies, one company on its own is extracting $6 billion a year from our traditional hunting territory. And we have every major oil company in the world in our traditional hunting territory, yet we're living in almost third world living conditions. Really? So further to that, when we look at the settlement of this lawsuit, what does this do for everybody else? Well, we all have basic human rights to drink clean water and breathe clean air, so this is going to affect that in a positive way. It's going to ensure that those rights are going to carry on for a little while longer until they find something else to do, something else to mess us up with. On an international level, we have protection under UNDRIP. And so I think through, utilizing some of those tools, and collaborating that with our treaty, we're setting precedents as Indigenous people and showing in specifically Canada, the constitutional power that we have, and the power that we have within international law. And I think that, just every human being, I don't care what color they are, be orange for all I care, every human being, Indigenous and non-Indigenous folk, have to realize, looking beyond race, color, and creed, Indigenous rights is what's saving our asses right now. Pardon my language, but that's all we have right now, because the Canadian government has dismantled everything else. The only thing that's slowing these processes right now is Indigenous rights, and the rights that we have enshrined in the Canadian Constitution and in international law. But until, these laws, these international laws are fully enforced, they're obviously not going to live up to their full potential.
That's a really great explanation, and I'd never really even thought of that as being one of the last bastions of things that we're holding on to right now, but it's so true. And thank you so much for fighting so hard for this. Even just opening people's eyes up to the idea that this is happening is very, very important.
And I think if I can say anything, is that our young people, they need to take a stand in whatever way that they do it. Here I am, this mom to two little small kids, and I should be teaching elementary school. And I'm doing this instead. And I tell you right now, It sure as heck ain't a get rich quick scheme. You know, I'm at low income status and I have 2 university degrees. But my kids have rights too, and they deserve to drink clean water and breathe clean air. So I think that, you know, if I can say anything to young people, it's that you're going to come up on trials and tribulations. It's not easy. You know, here I am, you know, I should be this upstanding citizen of Canada, you know, and because I fight this industry and I challenge people, I don't fight them, I challenge people in being diplomatic, transparent, responsible in this industry. I don't care which side you're working on, because our own people are involved in this as well. I mean, our nation is involved in industry. And until we're given something else, unfortunately, that's what we have. So, you know, when you have to choose your morals and values, your Indigenous ways of knowing and being over feeding your family, unfortunately today, we're economic hostages. My kids got to eat. So I can't stand here and say, shut down the tar sands, because then my people are going to starve. And I'd be ridiculous to stand here and say, oh, but we can go to the land. No, we can't live like that anymore. We're not stupid. However, this ecosystem, this Mother Earth is going to crumble underneath us. She's going to shake us from her like fleas, and she's going to continue to exist. And we need to realize that, and we need to understand that, and we need to own that as human beings. You know, here I am. I'm up on a defamation and conspiracy lawsuit for opening my mouth, for talking. But as a young person, it's looking beyond that and saying it's all right. Kiam, you know, in our language, that's leave it in the Creator's hands. Because when you go about something in a good way with good intentions, Mamuhtawinan, our Creator, will never leave us vulnerable.
I don't think there's really much more to say. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, and please go get warm.
Actually, I'm okay now. You pissed me off.
Yeah, it's true.